The sun sets over the rolling hills of Labette County, Kansas, painting the horizon in muted oranges and purples. A modest, unassuming inn sits near the crossroads, its windows darkening as evening approaches. To travelers, weary from long journeys along the frontier roads, it promises warmth, shelter, and sustenance, a brief respite from isolation and fatigue. Inside, the Bender family moves quietly, methodical in their routines. Pa Bender, the patriarch, is outwardly courteous, inviting weary guests to eat and stay. His wife, Kate, manages domestic affairs with precision, her composure concealing the sinister reality beneath. Their son and daughter assist in the inn, blending normalcy with subtle menace. The inn itself becomes a stage, every room, staircase, and cellar a tool for control. As travelers settle in for the night, little do they know that they are entering the Benders' carefully constructed trap. The family's methods are both calculated and brutal. Rooms designed for concealment, hidden spaces for isolation, and the pervasive, silent presence of danger. Guests move freely within the inn, unaware that each meal, each conversation, each moment of relaxation is being monitored, evaluated, and recorded in the predator's mind. The first murders occur swiftly, almost imperceptibly. Guests who exhibit vulnerability, tired, isolated, or carrying valuables are subtly directed into rooms or the basement. Pa Bender's charm disarms suspicion, while Kate manipulates perception, maintaining an atmosphere of civility and safety. The act of murder is sudden and efficient, blows from a hammer, subtle movements to avoid detection, and the concealment of evidence and the meticulous erasure of any trace. Each victim is reduced to an anonymous statistic in the family's ongoing experiment in terror and greed. Outside, the countryside is quiet, indifferent. The wind rustles through the trees, masking sounds of struggle within the inn. Travelers passing by note nothing unusual: smoke from the chimney, the warm glow of lanterns, and the hum of domestic life. Yet within, horror unfolds with chilling efficiency. Victims are bound, silenced, and dispatched, their valuables seized, and their remains hidden, often in the cellar or buried in shallow graves around the property. The Benders' dual existence is striking. To the community, they are ordinary settlers, polite, hard-working, and law-abiding. To the unfortunate few who enter the inn's private spaces, they are predators, executing a carefully honed system of domination, fear, and elimination. Each murder reinforces their control, their sense of power, and their ability to operate undetected. Travelers arrived at the Benders' Inn weary, their bodies stiff from long days on unpaved roads, and their minds seeking nothing more than a warm meal and a safe bed. The inn seemed ordinary, almost comforting, a brief reprieve from the desolate plains. Yet, as they crossed the threshold, subtle cues they could not articulate suggested unease. A shadow in the hallway, the careful glances of the family members, the faint creak of floorboards echoing too deliberately, all hints easily dismissed in the comfort of normalcy, masking an impending nightmare. One young man, carrying a satchel of cash earned from days of trading, recalls the warmth of the hearth as deceptive. The smell of fresh bread and roasted meat was a lure, comforting, but tainted with an unseen tension. He followed Kate Bender to a back room for his lodgings, unaware that this room was the stage for horror. The door clicked closed behind him, and suddenly the veneer of civility dissolved. Sounds he had ignored before, the distant scraping in the basement, the shuffle of boots on creaking floorboards, became ominous, deliberate, and threatening. The Bender's methods were both mechanical and cruelly psychological. Pa Bender wielded a hammer with efficiency, precision honed through repeated acts. Victims felt the first blow almost as a shock, an incomprehensible violence erupting in what had moments before been a safe, familiar space. Kate's role, equally terrifying, was in observation and control, ensuring silence, dictating movement, and manipulating perception to heighten terror. The victims' minds oscillated between disbelief and instinctive fear, caught in a cycle of anticipation, panic, and physical struggle. As the murders continued, the inn became a labyrinth of fear. The cellar was particularly sinister, a dark, windowless space where light struggled to penetrate, and every step echoed in oppressive silence. Bound victims could hear faint noises above, footsteps, whispered commands, the normal sounds of domestic life that mocked their terror. The psychological dimension of the Bender's crimes was as significant as the physical. Victims were stripped of autonomy, forced to navigate spaces designed to disorient, confuse, and subdue. Rumors began to trickle into the surrounding community. Travelers failed to return home. Family members grew concerned. A missing wagon, an unaccounted-for merchant, whispers of foul play. These were the first threads investigators would later follow. Yet the Benders' careful routine, their outward charm, and the isolation of the inn delayed suspicion. Law enforcement, without modern forensic tools or rapid communication, struggled to connect disappearances in a sprawling rural landscape. Each missing person was initially considered a misadventure or voluntary disappearance, and the pattern remained invisible to the casual observer. Victims' final moments, preserved in survivor accounts and posthumous investigation, reveal the intense psychological manipulation at work. Some were lured into the inn with the promise of rest, food, or lodging. Others were entrapped through deception or subtle coercion. The Benders understood the vulnerabilities of travelers, fatigue, trust, and the harshness of frontier life. They exploited these weaknesses with methodical precision, turning ordinary gestures of hospitality into instruments of terror. Outside the inn, the countryside remained indifferent. Wind rustled the prairie grass, and the setting sun cast long shadows over fields and crossroads. Yet beneath this calm, the Benders' domain was a theater of fear and death. The ordinary intersection of frontier roads and domestic life concealed the extraordinary horror within, a calculated microcosm of predation, manipulation, and psychological dominance.
Rumors spread slowly across Labette County, carried by travelers, neighbors, and concerned relatives. A missing merchant here, a vanishing family there. Small inconsistencies that, in isolation, seemed coincidental. But as the number of disappearances mounted, an uneasy pattern emerged. Whispers of foul play began to form a narrative too coherent to ignore. Yet law enforcement faced the immense challenge of investigating crimes in a sprawling rural frontier with limited resources and no modern forensic technology. The first investigators arrived at the Bender Inn under the guise of routine inquiries. The family greeted them with disarming hospitality, their outward demeanor calm, polite, and cooperative. They served meals, smiled, and answered questions with a practiced civility, carefully hiding the inner workings of their murderous operation. Every glance, every gesture was a lesson in concealment. Yet subtle cues, a slight hesitation, a faintly muffled sound from below did not escape the observant eyes of the investigators, who noted the unnerving juxtaposition of warmth and tension. As the investigation deepened, neighbors provided critical insights. Observations of unusual behavior, late-night activity, and the sudden disappearance of travelers accumulated into a body of circumstantial evidence. Law enforcement began to map the disappearances, noting correlations between those who had stayed at the inn and those who were never heard from again. Witnesses described faint groans, odd smells, and occasional glimpses of activity in the cellar or behind the inn. But the rural isolation delayed definitive conclusions. The breakthrough came when physical evidence could no longer be ignored. Searches of the inn uncovered hidden compartments, bloodstains, and concealed spaces in the floor and walls. These discoveries confirmed what many had suspected but could not yet prove. The Benders were methodically murdering and concealing their victims. Each piece of evidence revealed not just individual acts of violence, but a disturbing pattern of premeditation, cruelty, and cunning. The inn itself became a silent witness, its structure reflecting the calculated precision of the family's predatory operations. Investigators soon realized the scale of the crimes. Graves were discovered behind the property, shallow and hastily covered, containing remains that spoke of the violence inflicted within the inn. Items belonging to missing travelers, coins, clothing, personal effects were recovered, cataloged, and linked to the timeline of disappearances. These findings solidified the connection between the Bender family and the string of unsolved vanishings, transforming rumor into undeniable proof. The community responded with a mixture of fear, fascination, and outrage. News spread that the very inn meant to offer refuge had been a trap for unsuspecting travelers. Stories circulated of the victims' final moments, the deceptive calm of the inn, and the meticulous planning of the murders. Law enforcement faced pressure not only to apprehend the perpetrators, but to understand the psychology and methods that enabled such crimes to remain hidden for so long. In this phase, the investigators were both detectives and students of human behavior. They noted the Benders' ability to maintain ordinary appearances while orchestrating extraordinary cruelty. Every pattern, every subtle manipulation, every procedural misstep by the family offered insight into the mind of predators who could seamlessly blend civility with sadism. The combination of observational skill, methodical investigation, and community testimony gradually unraveled the intricate web the Bender family had constructed. By the end of the investigation phase, a chilling picture emerged. A family united not only by blood, but by shared participation in systematic murder. Each member played a distinct role. Pa's physical execution, Kate's control and oversight, the children's assistance, demonstrating coordination, strategic planning, and a disturbing lack of empathy. The scale and method of the Benders' crimes would forever mark them as one of America's most terrifying and calculated family murder units.
Travelers entered the inn exhausted, their bodies carrying the weight of days on rough, unpaved roads. The smell of fresh bread and sizzling meat promised comfort,
Yet, unbeknownst to them, every element of the inn was designed to lull, distract, and deceive. The Bender's victims were ordinary people, merchants, families, wandering pioneers, anyone whose exhaustion or trust could be exploited. One man, carrying silver coins earned through weeks of trading, recalls the quiet of the inn as both welcoming and uncanny. The hearth radiated warmth, but shadows moved oddly, flickering in corners where no light should reach. The creak of floorboards above and below carried a rhythm, almost musical, but one that unnerved him. Every step, every sound became a potential threat. Pa Bender struck with lethal precision. His hammer, often hidden in plain sight, delivered blows so sudden and calculated that victims rarely saw them coming. Each act was efficient, leaving minimal evidence of struggle. Victims described the moment of realization as surreal. An ordinary evening dissolved into chaos, the warm, inviting space transformed into a chamber of fear. Kate Bender's presence added a psychological dimension to the terror. She observed, guided, and manipulated, ensuring that victims were compliant, unaware, or disoriented. Her interactions were subtle, yet terrifying. One moment serving tea, the next pressing a command that would seal a victim's fate. Her understanding of human behavior was evident. She created uncertainty, distrust, and fear without overt violence, amplifying the horror of what was to come. Children of the Bender family assisted in minor but critical ways, locking doors, distracting other travelers, or guiding victims into rooms where the murders would occur. Their roles illustrate the calculated family dynamic. The entire household participated in a system of terror, each member contributing to its efficiency. The cellar was the darkest theater of these crimes. Faint light barely penetrated, and the cold stone walls absorbed sound, leaving victims disoriented and isolated. Bound and trapped, they experienced not only the physical terror of attack, but the psychological torment of anticipation, the unrelenting uncertainty of life or death. The faint creak of footsteps above, the scrape of boots on wooden stairs, and the muffled voices created a symphony of dread, each sound a reminder of human vulnerability and the predatory nature of the family. Some victims experienced fleeting moments of hope, attempts to escape, cries for help, or even brief interactions with outsiders. Yet the Benders' meticulous planning and knowledge of the inn's structure often turned these attempts into failure, reinforcing their dominance and the hopelessness of the victim's situation. Each sequence demonstrates a chilling combination of physical brutality and psychological manipulation, a calculated performance of terror designed to ensure control and eliminate resistance. The aftermath of each murder was equally deliberate. Bodies were hidden in shallow graves around the property, often beneath floorboards or concealed in the cellar. Personal belongings, money, jewelry, clothing were taken and catalogued, reflecting not only greed, but the family's methodical approach to concealment. Their system ensured that evidence of the murders was nearly invisible to casual observation, delaying suspicion and extending the period of predation. These sequences, repeated over time, reveal the terrifying efficiency of the Bender family. Victims' experiences, when pieced together, illustrate the dual dimensions of horror. the immediate, visceral terror of physical attack, and the prolonged, insidious fear of psychological domination. The inn, once a place of supposed refuge, becomes a labyrinth of terror. Each room, each creaking board, and each shadow, a calculated instrument of control.
Beneath the ordinary exterior of the Bender household lies a disturbingly organized network of cruelty and calculation. Pa Bender, the patriarch, combined charm with violence, presenting the image of a polite, trustworthy innkeeper while orchestrating murders with methodical precision. His outward demeanor disarmed travelers, allowing him to exercise absolute control over unsuspecting victims. His understanding of human behavior, fatigue, trust, and greed was leveraged to manipulate, trap, and ultimately destroy. Kate Bender, equally terrifying, wielded influence not through overt violence, but through subtle coercion and observation. Her ability to project normalcy while orchestrating fear was a critical component of the family's operations. She guided victims, monitored behavior, and ensured compliance. Her psychological acuity amplified the terror, creating a sense that the entire household was complicit, each member a silent participant in the predatory system. The children played their roles with unsettling efficiency. Conditioned by their parents, they became extensions of the family's methodical cruelty. Their actions, locking doors, guiding travelers, maintaining appearances, demonstrate the transmission of predatory behavior within a family unit. Even at young ages, they contributed to a system designed to exploit human vulnerability with chilling effectiveness. The family's motivations were multifaceted. Financial gain was a clear driver, as valuables were routinely taken from victims. Yet there was also a psychological dimension, the thrill of control, the execution of power over life and death, and the satisfaction derived from the calculated concealment of evidence. Murder became a ritualized expression of dominance, a means to assert authority over both victims and the environment. Isolation amplified their control. Situated on a remote crossroads in Labette County, the inn's location minimized external interference, allowing the family to operate with near-total autonomy. Travelers were dependent on the inn for shelter, warmth, and provisions, conditions the Benders exploited with precision. The remoteness not only facilitated their crimes, but psychologically reinforced their sense of invulnerability, creating a feedback loop of audacity and cruelty. The psychological architecture of the family's operation reveals a layered approach to predation. Physical violence, psychological manipulation, environmental control, and familial complicity intersected to produce a system that was both efficient and terrifying. Victims were manipulated, deceived, and ultimately destroyed, while outsiders, investigators, neighbors, and community members remained unaware of the full extent of the crimes. Even their post-crime behavior underscores this calculated pathology. The family maintained normal routines, serving meals, tending to domestic chores, and engaging with the community. Each action reinforced the illusion of ordinary life, masking extraordinary cruelty. This duality, the coexistence of civility and monstrosity, offers insight into the family's psychology, a capacity to compartmentalize, to perform social normalcy while systematically destroying others. Ultimately, the Bender psychology reflects the terrifying efficiency of family-based predation. Each member had a role. Each act of murder was deliberate, and every manipulation was executed with precision. The combination of charm, coercion, and violence created a self-reinforcing system that enabled the family to operate undetected for years. Their story is not merely a tale of murder, it is a study in the intersection of family dynamics, psychological manipulation, and methodical predation. A blueprint for terror carried out under the guise of domestic normalcy.
The facade of civility could not last forever. Years of disappearances, combined with mounting community suspicion, eventually forced law enforcement to act. Investigators approached the Bender Inn with caution, aware that behind its ordinary walls lay years of terror meticulously concealed. Every detail, from the placement of furniture to the behavior of family members, became a clue in unraveling the pattern of predation. Searches revealed the horrifying truth. Hidden compartments, bloodstains, and concealed graves confirmed the scale of the Bender's crimes. Items belonging to missing travelers, coins, clothing, and personal effects were meticulously cataloged, linking specific victims to the family. The inn itself, once a symbol of safety, became a silent witness to countless acts of calculated violence. The capture of the family was both dramatic and unsettling. They were arrested quietly, yet the weight of the evidence was immediate and undeniable. Law enforcement, armed with the testimonies of neighbors and surviving travelers, confronted the Benders with the irrefutable proof of their crimes. Each family member faced the consequences of years of deception, violence, and manipulation. Court proceedings exposed the depths of the family's depravity. Testimonies from survivors recounted the chilling combination of psychological control and physical brutality experienced at the inn. Investigators described the meticulous planning, the hidden spaces, and the systemic nature of the murders. The courtroom became a stage where the ordinary domestic life maintained by the Benders clashed violently with the horrors that lurked beneath. The psychological portrait presented in court painted the family as predators acting in concert. Pa Bender's lethal efficiency, Kate's manipulative oversight, and the children's complicity illustrated a coordinated system of cruelty. The evidence, overwhelming and undeniable, highlighted not just individual acts of violence, but a pattern of sustained predation that terrorized a region. Sentencing reflected the severity of the crimes. Though the law of the era imposed limitations, the Benders faced justice for their actions, and the community sought closure for the lives lost. The trial served not only to punish, but to illuminate the extraordinary audacity, calculation, and cruelty of family-based predation. The legacy of the Benders extends beyond the courtroom. Their crimes remain a reference point for studies in criminal psychology, family-based predation, and frontier-era law enforcement. The inn, the crossroads, and the surrounding countryside are imbued with historical memory, a reminder of human capacity for both ordinary civility and extraordinary cruelty. Survivor stories endure as testimony to resilience, courage, and the pursuit of justice, while law enforcement lessons from the case inform approaches to pattern recognition, evidence collection, and community vigilance. The bloody Benders, though removed from the present, continue to fascinate and horrify.
Their story is a study in the intersection of domestic normalcy, psychological manipulation, and systematic violence. It demonstrates how ordinary appearances can conceal extraordinary horror, how isolation can amplify predatory power, and how community vigilance and persistent investigation can ultimately uncover even the most carefully hidden atrocities.
If you enjoyed today's video, we thank you very much. Please like and subscribe to Rare Breed Chronicles. And let's dive into another story that defies the ordinary.